in a previous talk, we got as far as my my conception. We'll now look at my well, what I know about my very early life. My mother told me that the first thing I did when I was born was, in fact, to wee on her. So I suppose we didn't get off to the best possible start, because then she got what she said was abscesses and was not able to feed me beyond a week. I suppose she means she got mastitis. I think myself that probably this was due to the stress of living in her parents' house. I don't think that helped at all. There are various stories. I think it's probably my father that may have told me that my grandfather used to say from time to time, "Can't you shut that kid up?" And he would take me out, even in the middle of the night, to walk around until I settled down. Well, I suppose if your mother's got mastitis, you get upset, don't you? Because you're not getting fed properly. Then you put onto national dried milk, which is not necessarily absolutely digestible, but I suppose it seemed to work. I'm still here. Somehow I managed to get measles at 6 weeks old. I mean actual measles now, not German measles, the one that can make you deaf or blind or what have you if you're unlucky anyway. I seem to have not been unlucky insofar as I'm not aware that I've got any serious long-term damage, though I did used to get abscesses in my ears as a child, which it's been suggested that's connected to having had the measles. I don't know what the connection is, but anyway. Beyond that, then, I suppose a couple of months later, my father was accused of stealing food out of the pantry, which he absolutely and utterly denies. He says that it was my grandfather that was taking the food from the pantry. Bear in mind, food was rationed at this time. Well, because he was hungry, and dared to tell his wife that he'd taken the food she hadn't allowed him. I don't know what's true here. I rather would be inclined to believe my father on this one. Much as I like and admire my grandfather, I can see from the way my grandmother was that it's quite likely that he'd be scared to tell her that that he'd taken food he wasn't supposed to, because it's a weakness, isn't it? Something to admit to, that, well, I'd rather steal the food than be hungry. But, well, you can see where it's coming from, can't you? You go out and you do a day's work. He worked in the manufactured stone company, where they did make slabs, but they made a lot of much more fancy concrete and, if you like, fake stone things than that, and for important places, the government and so on. Anyway, he decided that he wasn't going to put up with this, and because, well, they threw him out, and he decided that he would go in that case. And they told my mother, "You can go with him if you like, but if you do, don't ever come back here." Which isn't very nice. I mean, is it? So I think you'll see, I hope you'll see here that I'm trying to tell you what our culture is, not what you'd like to think it was. So anyway, my father decided, he told my mother, "Will you stay where you are, because I've got nowhere proper to take you to. I will find somewhere for us to live and I'll come back for you. That way you won't have left and can't come back. If things go wrong, you're there." Which, I think that was honourable, really, wasn't it? But anyway, within 10 days he was back for her, having found rooms in Leicester. Now, this is basically lodgings, if you like. Then it was 2 rooms on about the third well, the second story then, in a biggish house in Leicester, which let out rooms to people. So Mum went with him, and therefore was not allowed to go back at that point. Now, things were made up later, but at that point, that's where they were. So the main story that I can tell you about these rooms, well, one, it was handier for Dad to work in Leicester, so that was one advantage. Mum was at home looking after a baby. Now, you have to remember that, of course, it was a coal fire, as it would be anywhere at that time. The coal was stored in the cellar. I don't know who bought what exactly, but anyway, the coal was stored in the cellar and had to be carried up 2 flights of stairs. And I think Dad, being out at work all day, kind of considered that that was my mother's job, to carry the coal upstairs, which she seemed to greatly resent, it being a man's job to carry the coal upstairs. You can see both points of view here. Anyway, she had to carry it up in a bucket, carrying me in principle. Well, I suppose that's that really, but I will come back and elaborate on it a little bit later. After not very long, they were told they would have to leave because the owner of the house decided that she could make more money from letting the rooms to single men than she could ever charge a couple. So they were now, well, potentially homeless, because there was no protection from lodgings, from you being evicted from lodgings at that time at all. So they couldn't go back to live with her mother, so the only other option really was to move in with Dad's mother. Now, his father had died when he was 6, so it was his mother, and his brother and 2 sisters that were living in the house at the time. So it was seriously overcrowded, but nevertheless, even my mother describes it as welcoming, helpful, cooperative. She learned a lot there, I think, from Dad's sisters about cooking, how to look after a baby even. There was help available. Everyone wanted everyone to do as well as possible. They all cooperated together. They'd always had hard times. It was always difficult without a father for them to manage, and they were used to it. And always it was one of those things. They had a coal fire, of course, but it was a stove. It had it heated the water which came out of a tap on the front of the stove, which sort of was used to do everything. And they had a tradition of putting the kettle on the stove, a particular place on the stove where it took quite a while to boil. It would take probably about an hour, depending how made up the fire was, to boil. And when it boiled, you had a cup of tea. I suppose there would be times when food would be short, but you have a cup of tea and you could wait a bit. I think it was kind of like that. And I can remember visiting as a child. By this time they had a gas cooker as well, and it was always on the lowest possible gas the kettle was on. When it boiled, you had a cup of tea, and tea was absolutely, by that time it had become part of the culture. Now, obviously the purists, going back to how we lived in King Alfred's time, obviously tea was not included. It's a foreign thing, tea. It comes from, well, India. It came from China originally. And I think this is where I want to just make a little point about the position of foreign things. Tea is a thing that we have taken into our culture. It is now part of our culture because we have accepted it and come to love it. That's why it's ours, not because any foreign people said you should be tolerant of this. We don't tolerate tea, we like it, and always have. It's a symbol. This is why whenever you visit an English house, if you're going there for more than sort of 10 minutes, somebody you know, they'll say, do you want a cup of tea? That is part of our culture. If you don't do it, then you've lost part of your culture. And I mean tea now, not coffee. You can offer the choice, of course, of other things. That's absolutely fine. You can actually drink coffee, not tea. It's tea you should offer. I'll just make one other point as well here about the wave. Particularly for leaving, if you look at any film taken of ordinary people as opposed to a film that's acted, whenever they're saying goodbye, and indeed at other times, when they wave, it's not like this. That has been introduced and taught to you by the television, the media, or by somebody who's learnt it from there, or by some in charge of us all person that's decided to show, in my opinion, just how brainwashed and under their control they are, because they can watch you say goodbye and it says, they have been at least slightly indoctrinated. The way to say goodbye is like that, or like that, or you can go like that. You can go like that to say hello, but do not go like that. You're giving it away that you've been influenced from outside. That is the way we've always done it.